Well, I've realized, I think I did the math this week, in a few months, I would be here in Houston for 18 years. Yeah, 18 years.
So you got here when you were 30?
22.
No, I got here when I was. I don't know why y'all want to always say my age. I got here as a young lad, straight from college, and then a year after I got here. Well, actually, 2 years, year and a half after I got here, in '09. A friend of mine from church I was at, we planted a church out in Thrive, and that's when I first met you guys.
Right.
And I tell this story all the time. From the church standpoint, production standpoint, that was kind of the things I was in charge of. Worship, I remember I was doing worship and doing audio at the same time.
Yes.
I was playing the keyboard and running the audio at the
Yeah,
same time.
because you popped up on the keyboards right before worship.
Oh, man.
Where's this guy come from?
I think of that day as the worst church experience ever. Like, it was horrible. But that's a different story from you guys. Like, when you guys came in, you guys had an experience at Thrive in '09 when we planted, which was totally different. Talk to me a little bit about that. What was that for you guys?
Well, I would just say you got to understand our perspective. He came from Catholic backgrounds. I came from Lutheran, traditional Lutheran. So like we're used to singing out of hymnals, to coming to this experience and actually having like a worship experience with like music that's actually upbeat and fun to sing. And so, yeah, everything about it was just like different and amazing. And I just thought, like, what have I been doing for the past 33 years of my life? Like, church can be fun.
It can be fun.
Yeah, and meaningful, and actually learn something. And, you know, the whole family was engaged. So that was what we were feeling, honestly. I mean, I don't know what you
were. Were you apprehensive on coming?
Well, no, we were looking for a church to transition out of the place we were at. I had been sober for about 9 months, and my sponsor told me that I needed to look for a Bible teaching church that had small groups. I didn't know what they were. He told me it was a way of getting discipleship. And we had a flyer that came in. It was the size of a magazine, and it was out in the front lot and foyer. And I read it, and it said, "Come as you are." That was one of Tom's things, is come as you are. And I've got tattoos. I was tired of, Sarah would make me like roll down my sleeves to cover up my tattoos when we went to the Lutheran church. And, some people already kind of knew my story. And not saying that they were judging me, but at least we didn't feel comfortable in that setting, which is, I think, the story of many people. And so when it said, come as you are, I was like, man, I'm going to go in ripped jeans and a t-shirt, And then the sermon series I was going to start the week after Easter. It was an Easter service, and it was a week after Easter was Sex Rocks. And I was like, yo, these people talking about sex, And it was all about, the biblical application of sex in a marriage. And we were coming from a rocky background of like marriage, trust being broken. And so it just felt like, although that, better sex wasn't what we were looking for a better relationship with God. And so that's what drove me there to go. So I wasn't apprehensive. I was actually quite curious, but I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know. It was all new. It was like, so it was a breath of fresh air to walk in, and people are welcoming you. I think Tom had U2 playing. It's a Beautiful Day in the front. And which was also like, it was something that made me like, whoa, like they're playing U2. This is not like the Lutheran church. And the moment I walked in, I saw other people that kind of looked like me, and wearing jeans made me feel more comfortable. The only thing I was like, when I walked in, the only thing after I walked in that I was apprehensive, I was like, I see a lot of black people. But Janet, who's Black Puerto Rican, she welcomed us and she gave us a hug. So I was like, okay, well, there's some diversity. And then you came up on stage, like I said, right before worship. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's a young black guy here. Okay, cool. Like, this is kind of what they said they were. And that was my first experience. And then when worship came on, it wasn't just the upbeat music, it was the words on the screen touched my heart because of what God had done for me 9 months before on that park bench. And so that's what made really the big difference.
That really kind of shows the power of worship, about how, and we do this in our environment at Union, is we speak the promises of God over the people, but like that's why I like people to sing in an environment like us, like sing out, like sing with us. It's not just the worship leader singing at you. Yeah. We sing together, we worship together. And I say this all the time, that we bring our worship with us. Right. And with that, people that may not know what it is to bring their worship with them, when they start singing these truths of God, I think that transformation happens. And I think sometimes I got to separate myself from the production side, you know, the performance aspect, making sure everything is right, cameras and lyrics. But what we've prayed for within that day is that, Lord, you speak to people. And I think that's what happened with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though my experience was horrible.
Yeah. Ours was amazing.
But for you guys saw something that was God for you guys, and the presence of God for that. And so I was gone. I was there for 6 months at Thrive to help them plant. Then I went back to Lakewood. But Susan, you and your family came while I wasn't back yet, because I met you, I think, when I came back in 2011, 2012.
2011? Was it 2011?
We started visiting in 2010, and we would come here and there, but like we were coming consistently closer to 2011.
Yeah, because that was when I became a youth pastor.
Okay, yeah.
And that's when I actually got to know you. I had come back as really kind of a consultant, as kind of leader in production for Thrive, because I was also working at another church in the Woodlands, and we went to a camp together. That was my first time.
Yeah, that was when I first started serving with the youth.
What was your experience like? Because ultimately, like, if you were there at 2010, that means I didn't see you probably until about 2 years after. What was your experience altogether, like being in an environment where you're with him as a youth pastor, and I want to remind you, an interim youth pastor.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
that was the title.
That was my title, bro.
Interim youth pastor.
Well, okay, so yeah, camp was pretty much the first time I started serving, so it was an experience. But I mean, I don't know. I had a heart for the youth at the time. They kept trying to get me to serve in kids. I did not want to serve in kids, even though I had small children. I didn't want to be around small children. But no, I mean, it was fun. It was kind of like I was a kid again myself. I saw how Pastor Rod was really, he got down to their level a lot of times, and I enjoyed that. I saw that and I emulated it, and I mean, it was fun. It was fun.
And throughout all that time, I think because we all lived in the area and so forth, I think we grew in relationship because we did ministry together. I know I saw you guys at the office all the time, so I think we grew in that. And then you guys invited pretty much all of us to dinner all the time at the house, and I think that's kind of how we grew family. And I think for Jeff and Monica, I think where I grew relationship with you guys was really in the transition time.
Yeah, because we came probably, just 2012-ish, I believe, is when we moved to that side of town from Cyprus. So a little bit different time, and we, big, huge billboard on the side of 1093, not your mama's church. And I'm like, we rolled by that 3 or 4 times, like, I got to see this. So, we walked in, and it was just like you said, loud and fun, and everybody's high-fiving, and, and the thing that caught me was, and I'll remember this, is you guys went up on stage one time to tell a little bit of your story, because I think Pastor Tom was a little bit, apprehensive to have you up there because he didn't know what he was going to say.
We need some filters.
Which, whatever, it is what it is.
He's always like, man, I love you, bro, but I don't know what you're going to say sometimes.
But what you said was me. And then we come to find out we're the same age, went to high school. You were just in the SWAT, and I was on the east side of town, right? And so that the stories were parallel run, doing stupid stuff, and, by the grace of God, we're still here, right? And I was just like, yeah, this is great. This is my people, and got to know everybody and just really pushed ourselves into that fold. And it was amazing. And it still is. I mean, it was and is, but it still is.
It's interesting to figure out how the Lord brought us together, and in a vision to plant the church. I do think for me, it's, I grew up in church. I say this all the time. I was born on a pew. A pew was those wooden things. They were wooden back in the day. They didn't have no cushions back in the day. I think eventually they got cushions.
Some Catholic church had it, but
but not my church. But coming from this and primarily, I mean, I think you grew up in church as well. But our focus for people that typically would not go to church, people that feel like they can't go to church. I think that's our somewhat foundation of why we started Union. Because yes, I came from mega church, and I'm talking about mega of the mega, super mega.
Yeah.
And yet God does his thing in an environment like that. But for us, there was a closeness that I think you guys felt in your time of brokenness. I met you 9 months out of rehab.
Yeah,
9 months out of rehab. And something like where we were at Thrive spoke to you because it was something totally different than Lutheran and Catholic background. And eventually, I mean, you mentioned it, at that time you were like atheist.
Well, many years before. Before I went from being atheist to a Lutheran church to, you can only grow so much in a Lutheran church. And, it's all high theology teaching on Sunday. It's rarely an evangelistic, approach. There was no call to salvation, so did I learn stuff? Yes.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize until I walked into Thrive that evangelistic call to say yes to Jesus in the moment when you feel Jesus touching you in the moment of despair is priceless, is invaluable. And I believe that every church should present that every single service.
Yeah. And I mean, it started with your yes. I know we talk about this a lot, the park bench moment. Yeah. How do we get there? Because that comes in the aspect of, like, I think she tricked you to get you to three. What was the story of how we got there?
Yeah.
She found my drugs.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a long story, but just to shorten it, I mean, he had been spiraling. I like to just kind of call it like 24 months of hell, basically. He was just spiraling out of control. I mean, a lot of drugs involved that I didn't even know about at the time, but drinking, like heavy drinking all the time. He was suicidal at the time. He was seeing, doctors for his depression and anxiety. So he was on prescription drugs as well. And so it just was like a very bad combination of a lot of things. He had a lot of pressure at work. He also had a pending indictment going on at the time. And so it just was like a recipe for just downward spiraling, like a time that I honestly just even hate to go back to and think of, because it was such a dark time in our lives. So fast forward, I'm just kind of in this place where we're hosting a birthday party for our youngest daughter. She was turning 3. And I was like, I was pretty much at my limit at that time. I was like, God, you got to step in here, because I can't keep doing this. And once again, party was a disaster. He was drunk. He was passed out. And that was it. I was at my wit's end. And so early in the morning, I got up. I went outside in our backyard. I sat down, just really praying to God, just like pouring my heart out to him at that time. And then I just felt like I just needed to really release him to the Lord, honestly. Like, I was trying to do all this in my own strength, and that was a time I just had such a heavy burden, and I just needed to release him to the Lord. And so that's kind of what I did. I just said, Lord, like, he is yours. Like, I can't carry this burden anymore, and it is what it is. Tell me what to do. And so in that moment, I'll never forget, like this green grasshopper out of nowhere jumps on my foot. I just like had this overcoming peace come over me. And I had like such a clarity of mind. I had been in such a fog for 24 months of my life. I like had like this extreme clarity come over my mind. And I just felt like the Lord just like downloaded this plan, like this 3-step plan to get him into rehab, which he always said, I will never go to rehab. Do not come to me and intervention me, because it's never going to happen. So I literally just followed the 3 steps he gave me, which ultimately got him to go into the exact place that he needed to be and say yes to treatment. And so that, in a nutshell, that's how the journey began.
But I would say, remembering him telling the story, I think you got to a place where you knew, like, I'm at my wit's end on what I'm doing to my family.
Yeah.
And I think that got to a place where, a very dark place for you in your thought process. Tell me a little about that.
Yeah, I think, I can talk about this now, but at the moment in time, what I was feeling was, and I think a lot of people identify with this, is you're messed up. You know you've done wrong. You know you're addicted, but you have so much shame and you have so much pride. See, these two things work in tandem. The shame is real, but also the pride is what tries to cover that shame. And so my threats of don't intervene me, I don't want to hear it. And a lot of people don't know Old Rod. Like, when you confront Old Rod, you were not going to win. I was very aggressive, was loud, arrogant. I was sharp in my tongue. And so, I at that time, although I knew I was messed up and I needed help, I wasn't going to say anything. And so I got to a place where I figured, well, I can't ask for help. But I woke up that same day, in the same moment she's talking to God, I woke up and I felt this presence in the room with me. At the time, it felt like a parental figure was sitting with me and they were concerned about me. And now I realize it was the Spirit of God coming to tend to me. And I decided that day, normally after a day of drinking, the next day woke up and the first thing I do is slam a Corona. But that morning I didn't. I chose today I won't drink. And Monday I won't drink. And then Tuesday came around, I won't drink. But by Wednesday, the withdrawals had kicked in of not having any Coke, not having any Xanax, not smoking any weed to taper off, and not having any alcohol, that emotionally I broke. I mean, and that was the moment where you're broken, which I think was God's plan, that when she offered help, like, let me drive you to the doctor's appointment, I was like, yeah, I don't want to drive. I don't want to talk to anyone. I needed somewhere to escape to from this feeling I was having. And so when we walk into the doctor's office, although it seemed funny or strange that he was inviting her to the back, my mind was still very sharp. And I said, something's up here. And I fully expected to walk into, his office is really big. I expected to see my whole family there. But when I didn't see anybody there, there's a short moment of false hope of like, phew, they're not going to confront me. And, he starts asking me questions. I lie. And she starts crying and says she found my drugs. And that was what I was dreading, is hearing the pain of my wife of something that I thought I was just doing to myself. But in that moment it became real. I'm doing it to everyone. So my smart butt, when the doctor asked me, well, what do you want to do about this? I said, well, you're the professional. What should I do? And he said, treatment. I said, great, sign me up. I mean, I was trapped. My mom got me in trouble. But I think, I think the Lord knew. The Lord knew my pride. The Lord knew where to break me. And the Lord knew how to set me up to where I would say yes. And walked into rehab. And 3 days later, on a Sunday afternoon, I had that conversation with God where I would give my life fully to him. And whatever he asked me to do, my answer was yes. And here we are.
Yeah. Again, when I came back to Thrive, I think your story in Kirby from church.
Yeah, Kirby.
Yeah, I remember the Lord checked me in a moment because I was drawn to the transformation story of yours and Kirby, because Kirby was this bass player that he would be jumping around the stage.
Yeah, heavy metal bass player.
Heavy metal bass player jumping around the stage, and I remember the first day I came back to drive, I'm like, who is this showboating dude on stage? Until I heard a story. And within that, sitting down with you guys, I mean, we would go to the house, whole family's there, pop's there, sister, brother, and we get around the table and we tell stories of all the buffoonery that had transpired and so forth. And I just was like, man, drawn to it because it is the transformation power of God that is able to restore a family, be able to orchestrate him that day of going to rehab. But I do believe that the Lord had shown himself before, because years later you told me you were about to speak a message and you were going to tell me the day that
I went over to your house because I was preparing a sermon and I didn't know how to tell the story.
Yeah, and I guess you were like, let me just talk it out and we can figure it out. And we were in my front office of my house, and I don't know if you knew or saw, because you were just going through, you were looking at like your paper and going through like their story. I don't know if you saw me get emotional, because I really do think, I mean, I know sometimes we think of the Lord is there, but the Lord also helps us feel what people were going through at the moment. And I think I felt you in that moment where you were going to attempt suicide in that moment, and you felt so like lost and done. And you said something, my family will be better without me. Talk to me a little about that, because I think there's a lot of like God's redemption within all that.
Yeah, for a long time, part of my traumas of childhood, I was never good enough. Whatever I did was never good enough, or that was what I perceived. That was the voice, the demonic voice I had. It's not the truth of God. And so I'd always work really hard to be successful at everything I did and make money and be successful and grow a company. And when those things came, that wasn't enough. And so you run and you start, excess, you start drinking a little too much. Depression sets in, you get prescription drugs, you abuse the prescription drugs, you start doing hard drugs. And then next thing you know, you're fully addicted and you're spiraling out. And at the same time that I have a manageable addiction, probably 18 months out, okay? Manageable. Like when I mean by manageable, I'm going through $200 of cocaine a week and probably $300 of Xanax every 3 months, along with my prescription drugs and drinking. Let's call it 4 nights out of the week at this, manageable. But I'm high functioning. I'm still getting up in the morning. I'm still working all day. I'm still coming home, being mom, dad, cooking. I'm still high functioning. But in your head, this is out of control. This is out of control. And in that moment, I had a company, and it worked with the public. But in a series of 3 months, I was visited by the Department of State. I was interviewed by a DEA, because I sold a house to a person that they used the house as a drug house to manufacture drugs. I had ICE, immigration, come to the office, raid our office for a file of someone they were looking for, and then finally the Secret Service. And these 4 visits come in a period of 6 months, and the shame and the guilt of using drugs, not living right. I already knew who God was, but I was walking away. I felt, oh, God's punishing me. The hedge of protection like Job had is gone. And so when I've done everything, I've got kids, and I'm just going to be a burden. I'm going to go to jail. So I call it the moment where you realize you want the earth to swallow you up. So I figured life would be better if I wasn't around. And you think about that. It's not a one-time thought. The suicidal ideation happens over time. And, when you're ingesting a lot of drugs, different types of drugs, I did the Heath Ledger cocktail, which is cocaine and Xanax. And so, I do coke all night, get home late in the early morning hours, and just taper down. You crush up Xanax, sniff it, and drink some vodka. But that night there was a menacing demonic presence following me around. And so I decided I'd take a handful of Xanax and drink the bottle of vodka on the couch. And for whatever reason, I passed out. And when I passed out, I don't remember anything other than waking up in the morning and pouring cereal for my daughters.
You said he was making breakfast afterwards.
Yeah, I was pouring cereal.
That's Sarah's
Sarah has a different
a
version
way
of that
different version
story.
story of that. You saw him.
Yeah, I honestly thought he was dead, and that was really, I had 4 little kids at the house, and I just felt like my main goal in that moment was just to protect my children from seeing anything, from hearing anything. I was such a mess, and I didn't want that to trickle over into my children's lives. And so my biggest fear, honestly, was like my kids walking in and finding him passed out, dead, somewhere in the house. That was my worst fear. And so I actually checked on him because he hadn't come to bed, and he was blue in the face. I was like, my God, he did it. He said he was going to do it, and he did it. And so I just was like a wreck. I was like, what do I do? I just start praying. I'm pacing around. I'm like, do I call the cops? Don't I call the cops? Do I call his family? It was a good 45 minutes of agony. And I don't recall. I think I did. I just stayed up until I heard you moving around. And then I was like, oh my God.
He's alive.
He's been brought back to life.
She walks in the kitchen and she asks me, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. I'm woozy from the drinking I did the day before, but I was fine. It's not till after rehab and we're kind of reconciling all these moments through the work you do in 12 steps. And I'm making amends with her that she tells me, that night I found you, blue with black lips. And the thing that clicked, I always thought when you take drugs like Xanax, you pass out and you just remember waking up. You don't remember anything, right? Which is sometimes you do things you don't remember because you black out. And so I just figured I just blacked out on the couch. I remember I woke up and I had one shoe on with no sock and one shoe off with a sock on. I don't know. That's how I woke up. Yeah.
You woke up.
I don't know how that happens.
When we talked about this story, again, we were just somewhat, I think maybe second year in playing in church. Thinking about this now, I think we can see how God's hand has been in you guys' life and in our lives. Yeah. Our yes in 2015, when we were really originally supposed to plant in 2017, that's a whole other story. Yeah. That's a whole other story. When we planted in 2016, and it stressed me out.
You can thank Pastor Brandon Barber for that one.
Yeah. But we said yes because I believe we saw God's transformation with you guys. Yeah. And I think we can find hope within our individual lives and our struggles that we have because we've seen what God has done through you guys. And listening to these stories, we start to see, I think, how God has orchestrated. You passed out. You were praying. There was a hope there that I think God intervened. And as we see these moments of pain and struggle, we see how God has resurrected something, restored something. And it's a lot of what our vision is for the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think that's our hope when I get up on Sundays, or when any of us get up on Sundays to speak to our teams. We talk about culture, Jeff, with our teams. We want people to lock in to understand that God transforms.
Yes.
Jesus transforms.
Yes.
Right.
And no matter where you are in life, no matter struggles you have, you say this all the time every Sunday, you're welcome in this place because God is here.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I think we're almost 9 years in, and I think it's September this year, 9 years in. What's the vision we have? Now, mind you, we've been through a lot within these 8 years. Yeah. A pandemic has happened. Yeah. A lot. Floods,
hurricanes, 2017
hurricanes, freezes.
Good Lord, yeah.
There's been a shift of things that maybe we had expectations of. Yeah. The bright-eyed, bushy-tailed type church planners. Yeah. But then there's a refining of what God is actually doing with us. Yeah. What would you say? And I'm going to ask you guys, because you guys are vision carriers and you have the flame. But for us, I mean, Jeff, your yes has been a different yes all our 8 years. Your yes is becoming a pastor a year ago was reluctant yes.
Yes.
What is that for you?
I take it back to whenever I was first asked or said, hey, we're going to launch this thing, right? And it was just okay, when? Like tomorrow? Like, are we doing it? Is today the day? What are we doing? Yeah. And from that point, it was just Holy Spirit driven. Yeah. Because I don't have time to look back. It's just go forward because this is what God is telling us to do, and we're going to do it. And I want to be a part of this. And now, all of that is still there, but there's this maturity of it, right? Because whenever we first started, we said yes to everything.
Yes.
Right? And
so
man,
true.
the word no is so strong.
Yeah.
And for the love of God, we needed to use it sometimes when we did it because we were learning and we just did, and we fumbled and messed up and all this thing. So now this maturity piece going from where we were to almost 9 years in is, I don't feel God moving us this way. Or I do feel God, and and you just go, or you stay, oh, wait, hold up, let him catch up. Okay, no, this isn't right. Let's hold on. And not right now. This is where we need to go. So, and just being a part of that it's matured me as a person, much more a believer. And to be able to talk to people about that and slow them down in places, or to be able to correct them because something's going to happen that's not good for them. Yeah. Instead of letting it happen and see, oh my gosh, they did fall. No, like come here, I need to tell you something. And that's what God does to us every day. Yeah, and we're doing that as a church now. Man, it's so good. And I think that's why God keeps bringing people that are hurting, but they see something in us maybe we don't even see, but God does. And that's why we're here. That's
good.
And I believe there's been a major shift, not just because we moved into a new building, but there's a major shift in our church, in how we lead, in how we're sensitive to the voice of God. Like you just said, sometimes we got to say no. And when we're in the early stage, it was yes to everything. Because you just, yes to people, yes to like, okay,
exactly.
You want to lead this? Lead our children's ministry.
Go!
Exactly. But there has been a lot of learnings, and I think as you grow, that's the growth. And I think for people, they got to hear that as well, because I think we had an expectation of, and especially me, again, I came from super mega church, so I'm thinking in 5 years, we're going to be this many people, we're going to be out of this. And again, I think God sees our desires, and he's got to put his desire in us. Yes. And that's the desire he flourishes. And so I think a lot of times it's years of shedding off man-made desires to have heavenly desires. And I think for you, Susan, I mean, 8 years, and you've got a 2-year-old now. So, you got a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And we're finally now, I think, really kind of getting to spiritual formation, some things that we've dreamed about for some times, and really discipling people. We've been talking about discipleship for years, and you've been in this space of kind of spiritual development. Where is the vision where as we go here as we disciple people? Because now we've got some things in place. We've had some really good, successful connect group seasons. Where are we heading from here? We're in our new space. We're in our new building. All the things that were in the way before are kind of gone. Mm-hmm. What's the vision that we have for spiritual development for people at Union?
Well, I think being in our own space, first of all, has really given people some ownership. Mm-hmm. And in that, I think they're really taking their spiritual life seriously. They're seeing where the church is going. They're seeing transformation from our pastors, how we're open to the Holy Spirit, we're open to where God's leading us. And people want to follow that. People want to follow where God's taking us. So I think people are taking ownership of their spiritual lives, of their own discipleship. Because things are more organized and there's a plan laid out, it's easy to follow. So I think people are excited about that. And I'm just starting to see a lot of growth just in the time that we've been in our building, a lot of growth in people. And it's really exciting, I think. Just with this freedom season, the people that are going through freedom and Disciples Way, I think we're just going to see a lot of leadership and in the most humble way. I don't think people are necessarily looking for titles and positions. They just want to help people grow just as they've grown. Yes. So that's a really exciting thing to see.
And I see that happening across the board, and especially I've said this, in the unconventional way. Yeah. I think sometimes people in our space, they're starting to have patience in their discipleship, in their discipling process. And I think it's always key for people to have patience. But greater than that, God is putting hunger in people to grow. And I think that's where God has us in this space. And I think for even our women, our men, like there's stuff that's been put in us. It's like, okay, we got to get here with our men too, as well. As the vision carriers, I think our vision has never changed. Our vehicle has swapped. I think over the 8 years. Being for the lost has always, and I know we talk about Luke 15 as well, like how God searches for lost things. Those parables are those. When it comes to looking into being 9 years, that's a whole lifespan, almost a decade. Where is the vision going from here? From both of you guys, where's the vision going from here?
Well, I would say, in the beginning, we tried to create an environment, most importantly, that felt safe, welcoming, non-judgmental, a place that broken people could find healing. And we've been great at that for the last 8 years. We have been so great at that. But more recently, I think the Holy Spirit really has been directing us, like Pastor Susan said, that there is a time for healing. There's a time for sitting. There's a time for receiving. There's a time for that. But then there is a time for growth. Yeah. You have to become healed and then actually start working in the kingdom for others. And so I think there's a lot of heavy emphasis on that as well. And so I would say more than anything, it is the life transformation in people that we're after. Because a lot of people stay stagnant. A lot of people like to kind of, come in and come out and just kind of never really grow deep roots. Yeah. And we want the transformation in people, and that's going to cause them to be uncomfortable. And so I feel like that's kind of the season that we're in currently, really challenging people to be vulnerable, to step outside of their box, to really be committed to growing, serving, challenging them, so that we really can see life transformation. And so that's what I would say. But connecting people to God, that's never changed.
It's not going to change.
Yeah. It's not going to change. But it's the season that we're in that of our people, that may change. Yeah.
And you talked about uncomfortability, like being uncomfortable within growth. I mean, y'all have experienced that.
Oh,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Still
I remember when
do.
you guys told me, in getting out of the bankruptcy, getting out of the things that you get, like all those things, like you had to make some major life changes that were very uncomfortable for a family of your size, even. And here you guys were again in 2015, 2016, as we're launching, being uncomfortable again and having to change your lifestyle just to plant a church. I look at that really for you. I mean, I remember the conversation you had when you were going over to BMW that day, and the resilience you had to get things like it's going to get done. I think I've seen that as for a church that, hey, we're going to do what God's called us to do. It's going to get done. Sometimes we don't see how it's going to get done, but the resilience in that. Where does that come from when it comes to our vision? We haven't wavered on who we are. Like I said, our vehicle has changed, how we get there. But where does that come from when it comes to us as a church as we move forward?
I think the resiliency part of it comes from my father. He was immigrant. We are immigrants to this nation, but my father was kicked out of his house when he was 15 years old and went to work. He was always was proud of never asking for handouts, always working really hard to provide for his family. He started a family young. And when we came to this country, one of the things he did was he always often talked to us about before when we were still illegal aliens, is my father didn't speed. He didn't do anything to break the law because he didn't want to hinder his opportunities. But he worked really hard and he worked long hours, and the time he spent at home was for us. It was uninterrupted. He took us to church and he took us to the beach and he took us to Disneyland and he took us to things. But I saw my dad go through heartache after heartache after heartache, and he never quit. He never gave up. He never threw his hands up and say, I surrender, only to God, of course. But that resiliency, I saw it in my home. And I heard stories of my grandparents doing the same thing. And then there's something innate in me that's like that. I'm kind of stubborn. And one of the most dangerous things you can ever tell me is you'll never do that, or you won't get there, or you're not good enough. Because I'll tap into something really deep inside, naturally, intrinsically, and I'll do it just to prove you wrong. Now, on this side of the cross, on this side of Jesus, now I realize that I'm not just doing it to prove you wrong, I'm proving it to prove my God right. And so that resiliency is part, something in my DNA, how I was born and raised. And then the other part is the spiritual aspect. I think that's why no matter what was going on in our life, even in the early years, which everybody thinks, I had just transformation, and like the sky's the limit. I came out of bankruptcy, our family was restored. But there's moments where I think our family restoration was the quickest thing because we were going broke, because we were broke. Spaghetti dinners at home made us bond. We couldn't afford HBO and Netflix and none of that stuff. And so we had to play games, play Monopoly with the kids. And so, but I was sober and I was alive and I had new hope. So I was game. And so in that, nothing was smooth. It was uphill. But there was always something in my spirit that told me, just keep moving forward. And so when my life started to slowly change and go trajectory up, and it really took off when Pastor Tom asked me to be a youth pastor. And when I took that step of faith, I had a raise that doubled my income, overnight. And, there's three things I never stopped doing. I never stopped attending church on Sunday. I never stopped attending my small group, and I never stopped tithing. No matter how crappy my check was, no matter how high my check was, no matter how good, if I had to take a vacation, it was around my tithe. And I think God honors that. And because of that, again, it affects your resiliency, your perseverance. And like the scripture says, perseverance that leads to hope and character. And so, as we move forward with that, I started to see breakthrough in areas where I didn't think I would never amount to anything. It was, man, the sky's the limit. Unfortunately, there is a part where you're naive and you think that the sky is 6 months away. And with God, it's never 6 months away. So yeah, that's where the resiliency comes in. As far as being new and young and starting a church 9 years ago, saying yes to everything. I think we were romantics of church planting. We were in love with the romance of church planting, and it is beautiful to see a church be birthed from a living room, and to see the first service of, I think we had 346 people in our first launch service, and we had a fantastic first year. We didn't never below 150. Like, these numbers are like unreal in a building that was just not meant for that, and we had a lot of grace to that. But we did say yes to a lot of things. And one of the things that God did work in me, and I think my resiliency kind of plays into this, is every time I had a problem with an individual or a leader or a family, or just something that happened at the church that wasn't what I expected, and it caused us to be heartbroken and hurt, I never blamed the people. I always looked within myself and say, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? And I started to realize that, yes, I didn't say no enough. No, you're not ready. No, you're not right. Yeah. But you're such in a hurry. I was in love. When I say the romance of church planting, is I'm afraid that there are so many church pastors or planters that are really more than masters of ceremonies than they are shepherds. And there's a danger in that, because a master of ceremonies can draw crowds. And that crowd, and if you have an entrepreneur mind like I do, and I think God protected me in all this, and he's really pruned me, and he's really rebuked me in many ways, that he's really kind of poured into me and told me and scolded me that you can't be a master of ceremonies. That's not who you are. You're a shepherd of sheep, of people, and we're here to feed them. And so the vision of Union Houston has never even swayed a little bit in connecting people. We're still connecting people to God. I still talk to the lost. I'm passionate about reaching the lost. I am, the saints don't like it, but the reason I'm dead set against flag waving is because it weirds out the lost. And the church is not for the flag waving. It's for lost people to be found. It's for broken people to be healed. And it's for those that are blind to see. It's not for us to be seen. And the flags just say something about, I want to be seen. I need you to see me how I worship God. I think there's a place and a time for that. But church on a Sunday morning is not for that. It's for those that are demonically in prison to be delivered. For those that are dead in shame with sin, to find hope, freedom, and faith in a Savior, and his name is Jesus. That's not changing. What has changed is I don't need to be a culture vulture. I don't need, and I say this with a lot of respect, and there's nothing wrong with these things, but I don't need to play Kendrick Lamar in the church to attract lost people. Lost people are coming to church because they need Jesus, not Kendrick Lamar. I don't need to use slogans from the world. I did all this. I remember one of my favorite sermon series is Walking Like I Talking, and we used the Migos sound. That was my favorite. I love that song. But the reality of it is I probably would do it differently, name it differently, because you're going to get more of an impact if you're authentically who God has called you to do and not try to mirror the world. Yeah. I think anyone that sits with me or talks to me or meets me immediately realizes this guy's not religious. He's not like other pastors. He's not like a mainstream church. And that's enough. That's enough. I can now come in and use the pulpit for what Jesus has called us to, which is preach an unapologetic word. And if it hurts you and it offends you, that's what it's supposed to do sometimes. Yeah. But it also heals, and it restores, and it reconciles, And so I've been thinking about this a lot, but I think of Moses. Moses only had a staff. It's like, I only have a staff. It's a stick. But it was what Moses believed in God, that gave him the power in that stick. Yeah. Right? And what many of the Israelites did was they followed the power of the plagues, not the power of the authority that Moses had from God, from his obedience to God. And so what I want people to focus in is that it's just a stick. And when I raise it up by faith in God, it splits the sea. It ain't the plagues. It's not the fantastical things. And so we've crossed over to the Red Sea, and now we're in the wilderness. And in the wilderness, God, this season that we've been, 7, 8 years, whatever, right, has been a season in which the rabble that the scripture says, right, that want to go back into slavery. You know what? I want to go back to when Union Houston was okay with playing secular music in church. I want to go back to the days when we had a DJ. Yeah. Well, I want to go back to the days when we did XYZ sermon series. Oh, you want the leeks and the onions and the garlic is what you want. And God instead is feeding us manna. And so the new children that are being born, spiritual children in our church, are the ones that are going to partake of the land of milk and honey. That word. And the other ones can go because they're scared of giants. But these new children that we're raising, they're going to slay them down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of what you were talking about as well, the shift that's happening in the spiritual development. And that is, I think, the new generation. We're talking in our church, not just in age, but the new generation in our church of how people are growing in faith. You mentioned in the aspect of, in that growth process, there are things that you say that are hard, are tough. And if people don't allow their flesh and or soulish, mind, will, and emotions to overtake, the spirit will do its work. And I will say that because I think you've had that.
Yeah.
And you've had that in phases of years. And so you know how God works. And as the lead pastor, you're understanding how to shepherd because of how you've been shepherded. That's right. By other pastors, by the Spirit itself. That's right. When we're talking about a resurrected life, a raised to life, what are you saying to people? And I know we hear it all the time, so this is not new for us. Sure. I think we, as Jeff works with our culture of our church, he's emulating a lot of things that we've talked about over years. As Susan is looking over and overseeing all elements of spiritual formation from connect groups and so forth, from discipleship journey, like we've had these conversations, but if you could give us a soundbite of what that is for the church, for somebody that feels that came maybe in the room that feels somewhat lost, feels like maybe I am distant from God. Maybe they might not use that word lost, but just distant from God. Yeah. Maybe they find themselves in financial ruin. They find themselves maybe in spiritual, mental ruin. What is it that, if it was just a soundbite, what is it that you're speaking life into that person? What would you say?
Well, I think that the thing that's interesting about our conversation today is that, that Sunday that I walked into Thrive was Easter Sunday. Yeah. And it's very personal to me. I say this all the time. Easter is the most important holiday in my life. It's the one I look forward to every year. I know they love Christmas. I love Easter. You know what I'm saying? Easter is about the defeat of death and hell and the victory of the risen King. Yeah. And to a person that's walking in church, that may not mean a lot yet. It will mean. But what it does mean is that something cosmically happened 2,000 years ago, that when God emptied that tomb and rose Jesus, the promised Messiah and Savior, from the dead, he took away the power of the devil and the enemies and all the demons, disarmed them completely, so that anyone without any religion, without any rituals, can approach God and be forgiven and immediately begin a relationship with God. And so that's what I was feeling that Easter Sunday, because yes, I'd been sober 9 months, but we were still in the restoring our marriage phase. Yeah. We were still dead broke. Our kids were a mess, except for the little ones. They were extremely cute. But my two oldest, one was kind of despondent because I put her through a lot. And the oldest one was, I'm an atheist and he's goth and putting eyeliner on,
Did he?
No, but he was a week. He was probably a week away from that, and we go to this service, and the worship music spoke the words of resurrected King, and the message was, I could understand it. Like, it was not that I couldn't understand high theology. There's a place I like that, but it was a message where it was less theology and more practical gospel, right? It wasn't like I was listening to a rabbi. I was listening to the rabbi, Jesus, tell me a parable and explain it to me and how that impacted my life. And there's this sense of hope that comes into you that realizes we're going to be okay. I felt that the first time when I gave my life completely to the Lord in rehab. I called her and I said, I know we owe $1.5 million and I know I made a mess, but we're going to be okay. I don't know what God's doing, but he's going to do something. I felt the same thing. It's like, oh my God, we found our home. God brought us here. He's doing a new thing. And so Easter has always meant that to me. And so every year I get excited because there's someone that's walking in today that is in one of those categories, or like me, completely broken, and is gonna feel that sense of hope that says everything's gonna be okay. Now, along with that, what I learned is that Resurrection Sunday introduced me to my church family, my spiritual family. And that spiritual family is what helped me grow in maturity over time, grow in disciplines, but also grow in knowledge of who Jesus was. Although I believed him and I was following him wholeheartedly, I had a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings of Jesus and what the gospel meant and so forth. And so I think even my first experience on our Easter Sunday translates into our vision. I think if you were to summarize it, Easter, Resurrection Sunday is the moment where God connected to humanity through his son. Through his death, burial, resurrection, and enthronement, he connected humanity back to the Garden of Eden spiritually. That's right. And there's someone's gonna walk in today, and they're gonna feel that for the first time, and they're gonna give their lives to the Lord. And years from now, they'll have the same story I did.
Absolutely.
That's resurrection.
Absolutely. And you've said this before. I think the greatest symbol of our faith is an empty tomb. That's the greatest testimony we can have, that he rose again, so can we. So that's good.